show up into dangerous neighborhoods overrun by humans, and it'll help remove swarms of bees as a public service. They also do educational programs in schools and help support local beekeepers. Joining me today is the Vice President of the San Francisco Beekeeping Association, Taylor Capozziello. Taylor.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here in Zoom land.
Yes.
As Vice President, you get speakers like scientists to come and address the group. Have they talked about the importance of the bee to the food supply? Especially we're having a lot of conversations about the food supply during this pandemic.
Yeah, hugely. Especially when we realize that basically 1 of every 3 bites of food that you consume is from bees or in some way. And we look at the fact of even bees just pollinating flowers, not having to do with food, and the flowers and how they are with the ground, aerating the ground, cleaning the water on so many levels that it goes back that it fixes. It's not just we think of directly like, oh, it makes this vegetable happen or something like that. So.
And you yourself have honeybees, is that correct?
Yeah, European honeybees. You can't really keep other bees. I've heard of some people keeping bumblebees, and then you can get little, you can make little things out of like maybe bamboo or any sort of like hollow wood that you can create for a whole bunch of natural, or the regular native bees that are around, because they are single dwellers often. And they'll just kind of crawl into a safe space. And so there's lots of kits or ways you can just make it for yourself for native bees.
What can you tell us about San Francisco's number of bees? How is our landscape of bees looking?
Well, California alone has about 1,600 native bees in it. The U.S. has over 4,000, and the world has over 20,000. So there are so many different types of native bees that go. The European honeybee is one type. Right now, San Francisco is doing pretty good on our numbers. We have a lot of beekeepers that are in here. We don't always realize it. I mean, on my block, I have 1 block down, there's another beekeeper, 1 street up, there's 1, 2 streets down. So we have a lot of beekeepers around. It's pretty exciting and a fun field.
It is a practice that's thousands of years old also, and it's really interesting that we're still learning ways to care for bees. Can you maybe tell us some of the challenges in raising a bee or a hive? I guess is obviously I don't know anything about bees, you can tell. Raising a bee.
They're fun because you're always learning something. And so I've been doing this, and I'm always learning other facts. I follow all these different sites on Instagram, and I'm always surprised how many more facts I'm always learning. Your main job is to trick bees into staying into the hive that you've created for them. So bees naturally want to split. That's how they reproduce. So, within the hive, the queen lays a whole bunch of eggs and they reproduce that way. But once the hive becomes so full, they naturally want to split. A new queen is born, they go off, and it keeps going that direction. So when we live in a city, you don't want swarms to happen. And so your job is constantly tricking bees into creating more room for them. And that's what San Francisco Beekeeper Association is about, is learning how to do that. If your hive does swarm, how to catch it, how to bring it back, or to somebody else that wants a whole bunch of bees. And then the other thing comes into with what's going on in the world with climate change that we're having, the impact on that with the bees population. So years ago, before I was a beekeeper, I heard it was a lot easier. You'd get a hive and you could keep it going for several years before reintroducing a queen.
You mentioned some people keep bumblebees, and I was stung by one not too long ago. It was in my coat, of all the places for a bee to make a home. And I just wanted to hear, like, maybe you could describe some of the honeybee, bumblebee, kind of what are they here for? What's a bumblebee doing? Just pollinating, right?
Yeah, they're pollinating. I don't know as much about bumblebees. I think they're like the cutest panda bees ever, but I wish I knew more about them. I should, during the shelter in place, take some time and research them a little bit more. Um, but with honeybees, we get most fascinated by them because the fact that we can harvest their honey, which is food, any sort of products. We can use their wax for things. So there's so many, it's agriculture. There's so many things we can use from them besides the fact that they also pollinate everything. Bumblebees are pollinators. I'm sure there's plenty of other things they also do that help, but I'm not as good on that. So yeah, other than I think that they're ridiculously adorable. And one of them has been listed as an endangered species, and two are really close up on that list as well. So yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. So it's probably looking for a home in your jacket.
But, to be carted around back to my house where it's nice and safe.
Yeah.
Speaking of endangered species, I know that bee health, we've talked about so much in the conversation about the climate crisis on how we can boost the health of our pollinators and other species. I'm wondering if you could tell us maybe what we can do to support bee health.
Yeah. So there's it. To keep it short, the easiest way that you can do is by planting a variety of flowers, even certain things like I said, leaving spaces for native bees to find a little home for themselves, or even not raking some of the leaves up that are under a tree that's fallen, because sometimes bees like to burrow in under that. Not the honeybees, but the native single dwellers. So lots of different things that give space for pollinators, and then also a wide flower variety, because some flowers certain bees are going to be attracted to and able to pollinate, and other ones others are. So the shape of it. So if we look at long ones, certain things like hummingbirds are going to be able to pollinate, while a bumblebee is not going to fit into there. So so variety, that's the easiest.
And obviously, the San Francisco Beekeepers Association has lots of resources.
Yeah.
I know that the membership, it's been in the city for quite some time. Can you maybe tell us your origin story?
Yeah, so in 1976 is when SFBA was originated, and it was from two beekeepers that wanted to make it so they would teach other San Franciscans how to be beekeepers, how to catch swarms, how to keep it safe, and how to keep it going. We have this idea that we're in the city and that beekeeping is not possible, but it very easily is. So it's also very fun. For some people it's a hobby, some people it's a life, some people it can be their business. But anywhere on the spectrum, it's nice because you can devote a lot of time, or as minimal as, once every 2 weeks going out and checking on them and seeing how the ladies are doing. So.
Yeah, I've been obviously watching a lot of documentaries, kind of excited to, learn more about these neighbors that live in my coat. And what I was finding out is that the social organization of a hive is like a corporation. It's like everyone has a role and everyone's intent on doing it. Is there something that's really fascinating to you about how their colonies work out?
Oh my gosh. Well, everything. So my background is actually, my PhD is in psychophysiology. So I study the brain, and the brain is so similar to the hive. And there's lots of scientists coming out doing studies, combining the two of them, looking at how each individual bee is like a neuron in the brain. And then it as a whole, the hive becomes how we respond. So if you think about it, I don't want to this is where I can get way too excited about things, but if we're coming up to a stop sign and maybe it's at an angle and we can't decide if it's for us or if it's the street neighboring, we have our brains going back and forth and individual neurons are firing off. It's called a go, no-go task. And so we're figuring out if we're going to break or we're just going to go on through it. And eventually we realize which one it is, and that's what we go with. Now, bees are the same way. So, when a study was done, when they swarm, half the hive leaves, and then there's these scout bees. And these scout bees would go and they would find a spot, and then they'd come back and they'd tell everybody about it and they'd start recruiting. But another scout bee found another spot, and they'll actually go back and forth until they figure out which the best spot is, and then everybody goes to that one. So the same thing as a neuron firing for it. So there's that. But then there's also the fact that, I mean, the whole system is amazing. So when bees are born, they start off as nurse bees, and they're taking care of the larva, feeding it. And then as they get older, they also start then their wax glands, and they start building off, whether it's adding more comb, capping honey so it can ferment the nectar. And then they go on and they become guard bees. And then in their last weeks of life, they go out and they become the gatherers, where they go out and they collect honey or nectar and pollen and bring it in.
And I wanted to point out that earlier you said the ladies, these roles are majority female bees, right?
Yeah. So there's drones, which are males, and drones are only basically created around springtime. And so they look a little different in the cell. They have a longer gestation period. And the males are only there for mating purposes. And
they are.
Yeah. And then at the end of the summer, then when they're no longer needed for that, they kick them out, and they can't fend for themselves, so they die. So
very fascinating, like just being able to nerd out and see like the culture of our bee community, and like it's so fascinating. If somebody wants to learn more, like how do they get involved in the Beekeeping Association?
So at sfbee.org, there we have our website, and it goes over everything. And just become a member, I believe it's $35 for a year. And within that, you have access. Right now, we're doing everything on Zoom, so you don't even have to leave your house, and you can listen to all the talks. We also have them recorded. You can watch them later. We have a YouTube channel we're starting that goes over even things like, I think this weekend we're recording how to harvest honey. So that way our members can go through and access everything. In normal life, when we're not in shelter in place, we're doing a lot of hands-on experience, going to schools, talking. The membership goes towards all that. But what's also nice is there's so many mentors in that group. So once you're a member, if you have a question on something, somebody's going to come out, help you one-on-one with your hive, and make sure that you're understanding it, and you have a good support system for it. So it's nice because it's not alone.
Taylor, I really appreciate you spending this time telling us about bees and letting me make jokes about them too. They were like light jokes. It's payback for that sting.
Yeah.
And I really love to hear that you said your neighbors are beekeeping. Can you just tell us maybe the district that you're in, or just sort of like what's the vibe of where you are?
Yeah, so I'm in a neighborhood that few people know about called Visitation Valley. And we're kind of around between Candlestick and San Bruno State Park. But everywhere, there's beekeepers everywhere. So in my area, it's a lot more local, old timers. Of course, it's San Francisco, so the city changes over time. In the Mission, there's tons. So, it really doesn't matter about how the exact neighborhood is. And anytime you go on like Next Door Neighbor app or one of those things, you can usually barter, trade, or buy local honey from someone like within 2 blocks of you.
That's awesome. Well, I will be looking for some local honey, and I really do appreciate your time, Taylor. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much.